All right, let me tell you something that's happening right now that almost nobody is paying attention to. And honestly, it's kind of terrifying when you really think about it. Silver is disappearing, not because people are hoarding it in their basements, not because some hedge fund decided to squeeze the market, but because the entire global tech industry is literally running out of options. And I'm not exaggerating here. This is actually happening as we speak. Samsung just made a move that should have sent shockwaves through every financial market on the planet, but instead it barely made the news, and that alone should tell you something massive is going on behind the scenes. They're stockpiling silver like their entire business depends on it, because guess what? It actually does, and they're not the only ones doing this right now. But here's the really crazy part that nobody's talking about. This isn't about making money anymore. This is about survival. Pure survival. And when companies worth hundreds of billions of dollars start panic buying a metal most people think is just for jewelry, you need to pay attention because something fundamental has broken in the system. For decades, maybe even a century, silver was controlled by banks in New York and London. They traded paper contracts back and forth, made their profits, suppressed prices when it suited them, and basically treated silver like any other financial toy they could manipulate. Those days are over, like completely over, and what's replacing that old system is something I honestly think most people aren't mentally prepared for yet. The new buyers aren't traders who care about quarterly returns or central banks managing their balance sheets. The new buyers are tech giants who need silver to build every single product that defines modern life, and without it, their factories literally go dark. Think about your phone for a second. Think about electric vehicles, solar panels, missiles, data centers, even medical equipment. None of these things exist without silver. It's not optional, it's not replaceable, and the amounts needed are absolutely staggering when you actually look at the numbers. Samsung's battery division and electronics arm have reportedly begun massive stockpiling operations for critical metals, including physical silver. And this isn't some speculative bet they're making for fun. This is a complete abandonment of the just-in-time supply model that dominated manufacturing for decades. Remember how smoothly global supply chains used to work, or at least how they were supposed to work? Yeah, those days died somewhere between the pandemic, the Suez Canal blockage, and about 17 other disasters that exposed just how fragile everything really was. Now, companies are switching to just-in-case mode, which means buying years' worth of materials up front and sitting on them. And when Samsung buys silver for their factories, that metal is gone forever. It's not coming back to the market. It gets bonded into circuit boards, welded into components, printed into solar cells, and permanently consumed. This creates what people are calling ultimate diamond hands, except it's not some Reddit trader refusing to sell during a dip. It's a trillion-dollar corporation that physically cannot sell because they need every ounce to keep production lines running. And that's a completely different type of demand than anything we've seen in this market before. Here's where this gets really interesting, and honestly a little scary when you think through the implications. The demand is completely inelastic, which is a fancy economics term that basically means price doesn't matter anymore. Hedge funds and banks, they'll dump silver if it drops to $20 an ounce because they're just chasing returns, and they can park that money somewhere else. But Samsung can't do that. Tesla can't do that. Solar manufacturers can't do that. If silver goes to $50, they buy it. If it goes to $100, they buy it. If it somehow hits $500, they still buy it, because the alternative is shutting down factories that cost hundreds of billions to build, and that's simply not an option for them. Even JP Morgan Chase, and this is wild because they've been accused for years of suppressing silver prices through paper manipulation, even they're reportedly flipping bullish now, not because they suddenly believe in silver as money, but because they see the industrial demand tsunami coming and they know they can't fight it anymore. But wait, it gets even crazier, because these industrial buyers aren't even using public markets anymore. They're going straight to the mines and cutting deals that completely bypass exchanges like COMEX and the LBMA in London. Tech companies are signing these long-term offtake agreements where they pay miners massive upfront payments to secure 100% of a mine's output for years into the future, which means that silver never even touches public vaults. It goes from the ground directly into factory stockpiles, and this is creating what insiders are calling a vault vacuum. On paper, mining supply looks fine, production numbers look stable, but the available silver that retail investors or small manufacturers can actually access access is vanishing at an accelerating rate, and lease rates are spiking, liquidity is drying up, and the ratio of paper claims to actual physical metal is reaching levels that honestly should terrify anyone who understands how these markets work. Now, let me hit you with the solar singularity, because this is where things go from concerning to absolutely insane. Solar panels are now the largest and fastest-growing consumer of silver on the planet, and for years the industry kept promising that new technologies would reduce silver usage per panel through efficiency gains and substitution, but the exact opposite happened. New high-efficiency solar technologies like TOPCon and heterojunction cells actually require 50 to 80% more silver per panel than older models, so we're using more silver to make each panel more efficient, which sounds great until you realize governments around the world have legally mandated massive renewable energy buildouts by 2026. Europe, China, parts of the United States, they've essentially legislated a silver shortage into existence without checking if there's actually enough silver in the ground to fulfill these mandates. And that's not hyperbole, that's just basic math that apparently nobody in government bothered to calculate. In 2024, solar consumed roughly 190 million ounces of silver, and projections for 2026 suggest somewhere between 300 to 350 million ounces per year, which would be almost 40% of global mine supply going to solar alone. And remember, this silver is consumptive, meaning once it's embedded in a solar panel sitting on someone's roof, it's effectively gone for decades because recycling is expensive and rarely happens. The world's above-ground silver stock is being permanently depleted at record speed. And there's another accelerant nobody's talking about yet: solid-state batteries. Samsung and other manufacturers are preparing for mass production of next-generation electric vehicle batteries that rely heavily on silver carbon composites and silver nanoparticles for stability and fast charging capability. And estimates suggest 50 to 100 grams of silver per vehicle just for the battery system alone, potentially pushing total automotive silver demand to levels that rival solar. So now you've got solar and electric vehicles together potentially consuming nearly 100% of global silver supply, creating this insane pincer effect that squeezes out literally every other use. And on the supply side, the outlook is honestly terrible. Years of artificially suppressed prices destroyed mining investment. Exploration pipelines dried up completely. Ore grades have been declining for decades, and costs keep surging higher. It takes about 10 years to develop a new silver mine from discovery to production, and most silver isn't even mined directly. It's a byproduct of copper, zinc, and lead mining, which means silver supply is largely unresponsive to price increases, because miners aren't opening silver mines, they're opening copper mines that happen to produce some silver on the side. Add political instability in major producing countries like Mexico and Peru, and you've got a supply situation that's frankly broken beyond repair in any reasonable time frame. And this is why what's happening right now is so significant. Silver is being defunctionalized as a monetary metal and redefined as a strategic industrial resource, similar to what happened with uranium in the nuclear age, except silver is needed for way more applications. Industrial players are executing what market analysts are calling a defensive corner. They're hoarding silver not to speculate on price gains, but because they literally need it to survive. And as physical availability collapses, the paper markets that have controlled silver pricing for decades are becoming increasingly fragile and disconnected from reality. Eventually, and I think this happens sooner than most people expect, the only accessible silver left might be what's held by private investors and stackers, positioning them as the last remaining source of supply when industry and governments are desperately competing for every ounce. The window to acquire physical silver is closing fast, not because of price, although that'll definitely be a factor soon, but because of availability. And once industry and governments fully mobilize and compete for remaining metal, retail buyers will simply be priced out entirely, where they won't even be able to find it at any price. The coming move in silver isn't going to be some normal bull market or speculative bubble. This is going to be a violent upward revaluation that corrects decades of artificial price suppression. And the industrial famine that's driving all of this, it's not some future scenario we need to prepare for. It's already happening in real time. And silver is about to reprice in ways that seem completely unthinkable today, but will seem obvious in hindsight. Samsung knows it. Other tech giants know it.
Governments are starting to figure it out, and the question isn't whether this happens, the question is whether you're paying attention before the window closes completely, because once it does, there's no going back. The metal will be gone, locked up in factories and strategic reserves, and the market as we know it will look completely different than anything we've seen in modern financial history.